and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. So sorry that we are taping this on Wednesday afternoon in the middle of the Republican convention, because you will have seen so much more by the time you see this show.
But I went to the barber yesterday and I said, I want the Mike Pence cut.
And you got it. Of course, I kind of have it too.
More about whom anon.
Oh my God, so much more. But I just want to emphasize that we are taping on Wednesday afternoon, so we're up to date on the latest on the Melania gate, but I'm sure more will play out by the time you see this.
Because Melania's famous plagiarism was exposed, if you didn't know, by an African-American gay journalist.
Fantastic. We are everywhere, and we know everything. Meanwhile, the Republican Party has nominated a virulently anti-LGBT Mike Pence for Vice President of the United States.
LGBT activists, including us, kicked off the convention with a demonstration against hate and guns at Trump Tower in New York.
And then the Trump Hotel. We'll show you a lot of that. An anti-LGBT group has withdrawn its support for the anti-LGBT First Amendment Defense Act because they think it is now anti-heterosexual.
The city of Cleveland enacted transgender restroom protections on the eve of the convention, just in time.
Those Republicans just can't catch a break, can they? The Methodist Church has elected its first out lesbian gay bishop.
The New York State policy against non-essential travel to North Carolina has left a hole in the Duke basketball schedule.
What a shame. California is finally moving ahead on the mandate for LGBT inclusion in school history curricula.
A New York man who was gay bashed in Queens County in 2011 was gay bashed again in the Bronx.
Britain gets its first out lesbian cabinet minister.
And we're going to be hearing a lot about from the AIDS conference in Durban, but we also have a report on a rise in drug-resistant gonorrhea, especially among men who have sex with men.
But you've left out the most important headline on this list. The absolutely fabulous movie opens Friday.
I haven't seen it yet, but we did see Patsy and Adina on the street
Yes,
yesterday.
they premiered the
because
movie.
they opened it down the block from us. And I was just trying to get a look, and they were telling me to move on.
I saw the tops of their heads.
Not Patsy and Adina.
No. All right, let's get to the Republicans.
Okay.
The Melania stuff is hilarious. It really is. But it was all blown open by Jarrett Hill, who used to work with Soledad O'Brien, and worked in Atlanta as a journalist, youngish gay black man who was watching the speech and said, wait a minute, I've heard that before. And he looked up Michelle Obama's convention speeches and said, this is the same thing. And he took the texts, put them together, put them on Twitter, and boom, the world blew up.
Well, you know, the kids know this because every time they turn in a paper to their professors in college, they're run through a scanner to see if there are phrases that you're using that are not your own. It's a very simple thing.
Well, I have to say, I thought...
maybe they don't have it in Slovenia.
Oh, look, the speech as a whole couldn't have been more bland.
Right.
But she is quite lovely. I say that as a lesbian. So it was pretty to look at while listening to bland speeches. And I don't think it was the biggest crime ever committed, but I do think the crime was how horribly they reacted to this and lied about it, and then they get up and talk about Hillary lying with a straight face, or as Rachel Maddow said, I haven't had a straight face since I was 16.
Well, but you know, we were talking about it as we were walking up to do the show here today. Of course, it distracted from what was a hate fest on the first night.
Exactly.
I mean, these horribly, practically violent speeches that were being spewed there, full of racial hatred, anti-gay. I mean, the only time sexual orientation was mentioned was by Rudy Giuliani in a really horrible speech, but all he was saying was, you know, the cops don't ask what your sexual orientation is when they come to save you, you know, or race or anything like that, but that's it. That's not exactly affirming our rights.
Meanwhile, of course, Donald Trump turned down an invitation to speak at the NAACP convention, which I thought was probably both smart on his part, given what they would have said to him, but really a hideous, disgusting thing to do.
I've been to the NAACP convention, and they always invite the presidential candidates, and generally Republicans speak, generally, not always.
Reagan turned them down in 1980.
Well, Ronald Reagan opened up his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where they founded the Klan. I mean, and acted like, oh, really? I mean, why'd you pick Philadelphia, Mississippi?
And then went to the cemetery in Bitburg, Germany.
Correct.
Of the Nazis.
The SS.
Yeah.
It was the SS cemetery.
Yeah, exactly.
So he knew how to send a message.
So anyway.
What side he was on.
It was nice that the Cleveland City Council, just before the Republicans arrived, passed a non-discrimination bill for gender identity, including public accommodations like bathrooms. That was a little slap in the face to the Republicans. We appreciated that.
But that didn't stop them from having white-only elevators at the convention hall. They had a sign that said white elevators. Well, I'm sure there was a red elevator and a
blue elevator.
Yeah, but it didn't look good.
Yeah, people have been making hay with the white elevator sign. So let's get to Mike Pence.
Yes.
You know, we knew this was coming, and it just gave me the worst feeling in the pit of my stomach as they moved towards nominating Mike Pence. Not that Chris Christie or Newt Gingrich would have been an improvement.
Well, Mike Pence is the governor of Indiana and was in a lot of trouble in terms of being reelected in the state of Indiana because they're sick of him. Even in Indiana, which often votes Republican in presidential elections, mostly votes Republican in presidential elections. So, you know, but Mike Pence, what a record as a congressman, as a radio talk show host, and as governor. This is a guy who got up on the floor of Congress and said, smoking doesn't kill people. I mean, just to give you an example.
Oh, by the way, we should not let pass too quickly the fact that today's story, again, it's Wednesday, is Kasich team leaking the fact that he was approached repeatedly and aggressively to be the vice presidential candidate and turned it down.
Oh, is that why he didn't go to the convention?
Yeah, it's one reason. But back to Pence. Mike Pence has a 100% rating from the NRA when he was in Congress, a 0 rating from the Human Rights Campaign, backed by the Family Research Council very heavily. You know, proudly introduces himself, as I'm sure he will tonight, as a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican. In that order.
Totally anti-abortion, you know.
Defunded Planned Parenthood, which is considered somewhat responsible for the huge, you remember the HIV outbreak they had in southern Indiana that was suddenly this roaring epidemic?
Yes.
Well, cutting funds to health clinics is one reason that happened.
The Republican Congress, I mean, Mitch McConnell got up at the convention saying, these Democrats wouldn't even vote for the Zika bill to stop Zika. Because they put in a defunding of Planned Parenthood. You're going to need Planned Parenthood to help control the Zika crisis, for God's sakes. And
Mike Pence was proposing legislation that would punish doctors and ban some forms of contraception.
In 2000, he wouldn't allow federal funding to care for people with HIV/AIDS, unless money was cut to programs that, quote, celebrate and encourage the types of behaviors that facilitate the spreading of the HIV virus.
He wanted funds instead dedicated to helping people change the behavior that spreads HIV, according to him.
He voted against the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. He voted against repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He voted for a constitutional amendment to ban same-sex marriage. Now, you know, this is a bill that had no chance of passing, but that he voted for.
Voted against inclusion of us in hate crimes bills, voted against anything helping trans students.
But they're acting like, oh, nobody knows who Mike Pence is. Well, no, he was quite famous just last year because he signed this really outrageous Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
Religious Freedom Restoration.
Et cetera. We have a picture of him at the bill signing. Look at this. It's like a Woody Allen movie. I mean, he surrounds himself with nuns in habits. Very few nuns wear habits anymore, so they had to be far right. And some Orthodox Jews are visible there with the hats and all this kind of stuff. But let's get a little bit closer into that picture. We have another picture which tells you who are the people standing with him. Well, the guy with the beard there is Micah Clark, who believes homosexuality is a treatable disorder. Behind him in the back is Kurt Smith, who equates homosexuality with bestiality, and he helped write the bill. And behind Pence to the right is Eric Miller, who propagandized that pastors could be jailed for preaching against homosexuality. Lies, lies, lies.
I mean, this guy is really right-wing. And then you may also remember, I rewatched this, you can find it on YouTube, the humiliating interview he did with George Stephanopoulos on his Sunday morning program, where Stephanopoulos asked him 8 times whether it should be legal to discriminate against LGBT people. And he just kept saying, oh, George, we're Hoosiers. We're not mad at anybody. We don't want to discriminate.
Well,
and Stephanopoulos kept asking him, should it be legal? Because that's what the Religious Freedom Restoration Bill said.
The national spotlight was on Mike Pence when he signed this bill, and there was this tremendous uproar. HRC whipped it up with the corporations saying they were all going to leave Indiana because of the law. So he got frazzled, and he would have press conferences, and he was a complete boob. I mean, I'm not. This is not a partisan statement. You just watch the tapes.
Hillary could nominate Pokemon as her vice president, and he would beat Pence in a debate. And when Stephanopoulos couldn't get him to answer the question about should it be okay to discriminate, Stephanopoulos turned it around and said, so, all right, so how about you say you don't discriminate, so would you pass a law in Indiana for non-discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity? And Pence said, oh no, I would not support that. He was quite clear about that.
Well, George Stephanopoulos was redeeming himself because he helped write the talking points for Bill Clinton when he signed the Defense of Marriage Act in 1996.
Well, there's that too.
So he was but he was redeeming himself because he was being dogged. He didn't just ask the question and walk away from it. He said, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. Answer my question.
And yes, and that was great. And by the way, the New York Times and other mainstream news organizations, in writing about Pence and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, write about how businesses rebelled and everybody got upset. And then they say, so he fixed the bill.
Actually, there was a cover of the Indianapolis Star which did say in letters, fix this. And in fact, they did repeal a lot of the worst provisions of it. But then the LGBT community in Indiana comes back and says, okay, now cover us in the human rights law of the state. And guess what? Indiana and Mike Pence said no.
Now, remember that Mike Pence was supporting Ted Cruz in the Indiana primary. He is a big stooge of the Koch brothers. There's a lot of speculation that the whole reason for his nomination is because he brings in the Koch brothers, although they have not said yet that they're on board with Trump.
Well, they have to figure the Trump. They have to figure that Trump will get impeached if he gets elected.
He was the first member. There's that, of the Tea Party caucus in the House of Representatives when he was serving there. And the real reason Trump picked him? Because he went out in public and said that Trump beat me like a drum at golf. Now, that's a good vice president.
Oh, my God. Well, if you saw the 60 Minutes interview with the two of them, Pence couldn't get a word in edgewise. And Leslie Stahl says, you're criticizing Hillary for voting for the Iraq War. Mike Pence voted for the Iraq War. You're criticizing Hillary over Libya. Mike Pence, we got it on tape here, says we got to invade Libya and get rid of Gaddafi. He said, what did Trump say? He said, "Who cares?" Or
Well,
"I don't care. I don't care."
Yeah, but he could have finished the sentence by saying, I don't care because this stooge is not going to have any power to do anything in my administration. What do you think this is all about? It's certainly not about hiring someone to do anything.
Well,
Why should he care?
It's
the Trump show. So I'm just grateful that someone as weak as Mike Pence is going to end up in a debate for the vice presidency. But God help us if he ever gains any real power, because he is
it's scary.
Horribly scary.
Scary. And they did adopt their virulently anti-gay platform. There was an out lesbian member of the platform committee, Rachel Hoff. She says she doesn't plan to leave the party, but she says there's some bad stuff in there about bathrooms and hurtful language on gay parenting and adoption.
First of all, you know what Trump said about the really hideous anti-LGBT platform? It's very good. And then Oklahoma Governor Mary Fallin, who was chairing the platform committee, was confronted about the anti-gay platform. She says it's not anti-gay because there were gays on the committee. One, this Rachel Hoff, who offered 3 amendments to the anti-gay platform, who pleaded with them, you can see this online too, pleaded with them not to have the anti-same-sex marriage, anti-trans, all these elements in it, and they just shut her down completely.
Sure.
Just totally
Well, they
shut
shut
her
down any dissent in the convention.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the dissent at the convention is actually coming from the far right, who don't think Trump is a real conservative.
Yes,
which is one of the reasons
yes.
that Pence was
Yes.
made vice president.
Yes.
Or the nominee for vice president.
And then you have little moments like Trump walking out on Monday night to "We Are the Champions," which the band Queen has objected to. He's used this repeatedly. They object every time he uses it, and he just keeps using it.
I don't care.
Exactly.
I don't care. That's what he says. I don't care.
The Log Cabin Republicans, as we told you last week, have called it the most anti-LGBT platform ever. And there was some concern because they used their criticism of it as a fundraising tool. And people said, this is a little ugly that they're raising money off of this. But they took that money and they used every penny of it, according to them, I have only their word for it, to take a full-page ad in the Cleveland edition of USA Today, which we have a picture of, I believe. This is their description of the platform committee. Losers, morons, sad.
It's not a description of the Log Cabin Club?
Come on.
No, because they have been saying that they want to support Trump because they're trying to peddle him as like okay on gay stuff.
Yes.
Because you know what? He went to a gay wedding. I don't know if he knew he was going to a gay wedding.
And when asked his favorite music, he said anything by Elton John.
My God.
He did.
Well, Elton John. I mean,
He said that on the Golf Channel this
Elton
week.
John sang at Rush Limbaugh's
Yes!
10th wedding.
For $1 million.
Elton John has done a lot of good around AIDS and things like that.
And then there's Peter Thiel, the out gay founder of PayPal, who is speaking at the convention after we do this taping. I'm not sure whether it's tonight or tomorrow night.
Peter Thiel was brought out by Gawker and was furious about that, and that's why he funded the lawsuit against Hulk Hogan that bankrupted Gawker.
Yep. So he is, I shudder to think what we have to listen to from him. The last out gay convention speaker for the Republicans was Jim Colby in 2000, who talked about trade issues.
I was there, and the Texas delegation gets up, and now he's talking about trade. And they turn their backs on Jim Colby because he's a homosexual, and it's part of our religious freedom to turn our backs on gay people. That's in the Bible, I think.
So, to wind this up, we will show you what we did here in New York on the first day of the convention. We decided that...
we wanted to stop the hate and stop the guns.
Yes, and that we wanted to have a voice here in New York because we weren't going to go to Cleveland. So we just wanted to do something on the first day of the convention. And interestingly enough, as we gathered outside Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue, Mr. Trump was coming out of the building to get in a car to go to the airport to go to Cleveland to introduce Melania.
3 hours beforehand.
Yeah. Well, you know, he has his own jet, and it only takes a few minutes to get to Cleveland. So, Queer Nation, Gays Against Guns, New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, Code Pink, parishioners from Judson Church, a whole wide range of people, Vocal New York, ACT UP, showed up outside Trump Tower in the pouring rain to do a demonstration with beautiful Gilbert Baker rainbow banners, and then marched over to the Trump Hotel. Gays Against Guns produced a video documenting all this and talking to some of the people there, and they were kind enough to let us use it, and so here it is.
Why am I here? Because, well, the guns don't just show up in the inner cities. It comes from somewhere. You need to get these guns off the street. It's to protect all of our citizens. We need to stop the hate when it comes to the gays, Muslims, blacks, racism. We need to come together as Americans and not be hyphenated anymore.
How many more? How many more?
I think that the problem is hate, and that we've got to work on that issue. And I think that that's at the bottom of all of the violence that we're seeing, whether it's the cops killing black people, whether it's other people killing police. There are 100 ways to kill us. And like for LGBT people, just the hate kills. It kills young people who commit suicide. It kills older people who are so stressed out by being gay that they're in the closet. It's pervasive. But I need to be here, and I can't stand that the Republicans are blocking every single bit of legislation, that they have basically blocked Obama because of their racism, because they are misogynist, because they are homophobic, and everything that they do spews hate.
Odio, cobardía, ignorancia, atrasamiento al país.
There needs to be more young people out here.
The voice of the millennials.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent.
I think that sometimes people in our generation who haven't experienced firsthand homophobia feel like a right to being able to be gay openly and comfortably is sort of like a privilege or something that we have no matter what, because in some ways we haven't had to fight for it.
That is a protest outfit. So why are you here today, honey?
I'm here to support Gays Against Guns. Go to their website. It tells all the important things that you need to know, because it's very common sense legislation that needs to be passed. Check it out. Support us.
Awesome.
Vote out the NRA puppets in November. Find out who yours is.
Gays Against Guns, a very spirited demonstration.
A lot of Gays Against Guns chapters are springing up around the country, and if you are interested in that, do go to their gaysagainstguns.net website. We want to thank producer Tanya Silverataram, editor Paul Rowley, and photographer, videographer Chris Aruda for that.
And just to show that we're fair
video.
and balanced, I mean, there were also chapters of Pink Pistols, which is the pro-gun gay group as well.
One guy accosted us at the demo and said, you know, how dare you try to take my guns away? I need them for protection.
A viewer wrote about this to me, and I wouldn't want to deny anybody a weapon. I would never use a weapon, but a weapon for self-protection. But we're talking about assault weapons, which are committing mass killings on a regular basis. And I know some people do that with handguns on, you know, in Chicago, you read about this and all that kind of stuff. But it's the stuff with the assault rifles is absolute madness.
And I take the point of the legendary Maxine Wolf there in the middle of the video talking about hate and the need to concentrate on hate.
Yes.
And whether it is the violence of the police against various communities, particularly young black men, or the hatred we experience, or any of it. That is really the core of all of this.
And we're also concerned about sexual harassment, and apparently so is the News Corporation run by Rupert Murdoch, because they are finally, after 20 years, getting rid of Roger Ailes.
Keep your fingers crossed. The deal is not done yet.
Not directly because of the Gretchen Carlson lawsuit.
No, because Megyn Kelly.
Right, Megyn Kelly, their star, who was not defending Ailes during this, even though she has called him a friend in the past, acknowledged to the investigators from the law firm that was hired by News Corp to look into this, said, yeah, he went after me. Of course he did. I mean, the stories of Roger Ailes for 60 years going after women is just appalling. Every single woman who worked for him was expected to put out.
Well, I've seen women who work for Fox News deny that he ever did anything to them. You see these women appear on The View or elsewhere who say he did nothing to me. So I can't say it's 100%. No. But my experience of Roger Ailes was watching him toss an ACT UP member down a flight of stairs at the Hilton Hotel in New York as we were protesting something that they were involved in.
Yeah, he was a very violent guy.
Yeah.
I hope.
All right, let's get to other news. You talked about the guy who was attacked in the Bronx.
I'm going to get to all these violent stories.
Yes, well, I have them at the top of my list. In fact, we have two stories of men attacked in New York City, one in the Bronx, one in Manhattan. One of them was knifed pretty badly.
Marquis Devereaux, 39, he's now been knifed twice over his sexuality, once in 2011 and again this past Sunday when he was slashed in the arm by two brutes who hurled anti-gay slurs at him, who said, "We're not going to do any of that boyfriend stuff around here," they said as they accosted him, called him a homo, a faggot, and a bumbaclot, a Jamaican term for a rag used as toilet paper. The suspects fled. He called 911. And this happened to him in Queens years ago, and that guy who assaulted him was sent to prison.
Update on Orlando. We're told by a viewer that two of the people shot there are still in the hospital, one in serious condition, one stable. And some of those who were wounded have been sent to rehabilitation facilities.
But the FBI has been unable to verify that the perpetrator in that case used gay dating apps, and instead has found evidence that Mateen was cheating on his wife and with other women. But there are others, there are gay people from that area who went to the Pulse, who say they had contact with Mateen on two gay dating apps, Grindr and Jack, and stand by their original claims.
Look, whether I believe the people who say they saw him in the club repeatedly and talked to him, I think they're not hallucinating about that. There's a big debate because the FBI says they have not been able to definitely confirm that it was a hate crime. But here's the deal. The club was an hour away from where he lived.
Yes.
There are so many potential targets that anybody could have if they just want to go into a crowded area and shoot a lot of people.
He was looking at Disneyland, too.
He was, but he picked this club, and that's where he went, and that's who he shot.
Yes.
And he shot 100 people there, killing half of them. And you just don't do that by happenstance. He picked this venue.
Right.
So,
a Latino gay spot for that.
Well, it was Latino night at the spot.
Well, that night, yes.
Yes, I don't know whether he targeted that particular night, but he certainly targeted that club. Sad news from the District of Columbia, where another trans woman, Dee Dee Dodds, has been murdered. She was shot a couple of weeks ago.
July the 4th.
22 years old. She was a sex worker. She was out on the street, and she was connected. She was very connected in the community. She was part of the community at Casa Ruby, which is the the Center for Trans People in D.C.
A vigil was held in her honor on Saturday, and a memorial service is scheduled for next week, the week of July 25th. I don't have the details.
She is the 14th documented trans woman murdered in 2016.
More than 90% of the victims are people of color, and more than 3/4 are women.
Yeah.
So, you know, and again, why we talk about this practically every week, and part of it is because it's finally coming to the surface. I think this used to happen before.
Yes.
The victims would be misgendered by the police, and we would never hear about it.
Well, another thing that doesn't get talked about much over the years is intimate partner violence, and there's a case in Los Angeles of a one guy killing his boyfriend or former boyfriend, strangling him to death. There was a lot of drug involvement in this. The guy who was killed was a beloved member of the community. The boyfriend who killed him was someone who'd been involved with meth and was in a sober house, but maybe or maybe not having that work, and just a terrible situation.
Should we
Frank Rogers is the guy who
you
was
have
killed.
Other violent stories?
No,
Or
but
should-
I have a sad report of a death of not violence, just a guy I want to mourn, Jeff Montgomery, who was a very important leader in the LGBT community.
We have a picture of him. There he is. 63 years old.
Yeah, Detroit. He described himself as someone who was a very uninvolved gay man for years. He did PR for the Detroit Thanksgiving Day Parade for years. And then his lover was murdered outside a gay bar in Detroit in the mid-'80s. And Jeff was totally radicalized by that and became an activist. He founded or co-founded the Triangle Foundation in Detroit, which was named in honor of the Pink Triangle from the Nazi era.
Which has essentially evolved to become Equality Michigan now.
And I knew Jeff because we'd wind up at demonstrations together and conferences together in the late 80s and 90s. And he was a very special person. He was smart as a whip. He was funny as hell. Incredibly generous, dedicated activist, just a great, great guy. And I've met a lot of wonderful people in this movement and feel very grateful for that. But Jeff was really a cut above, and his death is an enormous loss to so many people.
Well, Jim Lessenberry, who's a former board chair at the Triangle Foundation, said certainly he was an advocate for LGBT causes, but he also saw the importance of advocating for our issues by advocating for all oppressed people.
One of the things that brought him to prominence early on was he was involved. You remember the Jenny Jones case where the guy went on the air on the Jenny Jones show and said he had a crush on this other guy, and the guy killed him? And then tried this whole gay panic defense. And Jeff really led all the campaign to prove that the gay panic defense was not legitimate, and had to do enormous work on that. And that was 20 years ago, and it was not a popular analysis at the time. And he was a stalwart activist in getting that case understood appropriately.
Okay, all right. Should we start? So let's talk about some of the things that are going on nationally and in the states. We've told you about the First Amendment Defense Act. The Republicans in Congress celebrated the month anniversary of the massacre in Orlando by holding a hearing on this anti-LGBT bill. But at this point, that was on the 12th. This point, the Anti-LGBT Family Research Council has withdrawn its support because there was a change made in the bill in committee, which would legalize discrimination against married straight couples on the same grounds, as the First Amendment thing.
Well, it's some of what they did with AIDS legislation years ago. They tried to write AIDS legislation that outlawed
promotion of homosexuality.
Yes.
So then they said promotion of homosexuality or heterosexuality.
So now they've rewritten this
Just
bill.
don't promote anything.
To say that religions, you can use a religious excuse to discriminate not just against LGBT people, but any people.
Yes.
And this has offended the Family Research Council, which said that they got rid of the live and let live policy to appease the left. Let's remember that the Family Research Council has been labeled a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center.
This is the reason that the Mississippi judge overturned the Mississippi law on the religious freedom, because the judge said that you're taking particular religious beliefs. You're not talking about all religious beliefs, and the Christian right does not like it when you,
point out their bigotry.
Right. When it's not about their religion.
Yes.
I mean, God, the person who gave the invocation at the Republican convention, thank you, Lord Jesus. It was all Jesus, Jesus Christ, everything. I mean, that didn't used to happen at invocations. They would be kind of generic about it, but...
We are slowly splitting apart farther and farther and farther.
Can't we all get along?
Evidently
That's
not.
what religious freedom is really about.
Well, in Kentucky, the appeals court has denied Kim Davis's appeal of her contempt citation for not wanting to sign marriage licenses for same-sex couples, and the new law equalizing licenses has taken effect. You can apply for a marriage license in Kentucky and designate yourself any way you want on that license.
Okay.
And Kim Davis's case is moot. And
in Alabama, all that stuff about Roy Moore, the head judge of the Alabama Judiciary Commission, has said that the efforts to have him dismissed are totally on target. You should get rid of him now. There's going to be a process that he's going to go through, but he's not getting any backing from the Independent Inquiry Commission.
Yes, but will he come back yet again and get himself elected to something?
Could be elected governor or something.
I know, I think he wants to be.
In
In Virginia, the state is appealing the ruling on Gavin Grimm being allowed to use the boys' restroom in his high school to the Supreme Court, and now they've asked the Supreme Court for an injunction preventing Gavin from using the bathroom until the Supreme Court decides the case. I don't think they're going to get anywhere with that.
In North
but the depth of their bigotry is astonishing.
In North Carolina, the U.S. Department of Justice has asked a judge to dismiss Governor Pat McCrory's lawsuit against the federal government. The federal government argues that McCrory's lawyers rushed to the courthouse because they knew the Justice Department was planning on suing the state.
In Kenosha, Wisconsin, a young trans man is suing for bathroom access at his school. The school said that not only would they not allow him to use the boys' restroom, but they want him and other trans students to wear green wristbands so that their bathroom use can be monitored.
It's absolutely outrageous.
Speaking of the
bright green wristbands.
Speaking of the pink triangle.
And he says, look, I have no problems with the other students and with my teachers. He says they're fine. He says it's just the administrators who are screwing around on this.
Well, that's Gavin Grimm's story in Virginia, too. The students are always fine. It's an occasional parent, an occasional administrator starts raising objections, and suddenly the whole place blows up.
Well, speaking of schools, great progress in California after multiple delays. They passed a law about integrating LGBT issues into history classes
5 years
and things.
ago.
So they're finally doing it, starting in the 2nd grade with discussions about diverse families, 4th grade lessons about California's place in the gay rights movement. Seniors in high school will learn about the Supreme Court ruling legalizing same-sex marriage. This did pass 5 years ago, but they're finally getting to it.
Well, you'd think that history classes in high schools would routinely be teaching this kind of history, but no, it's shocking. I am often shocked by the level of ignorance in the American population. And really, a lot of it traces back to the terrible teaching in these schools. They are
you
not.
Start talking about gay stuff in schools, those
it's
ears
not
are
just gay stuff.
Those ears are going to perk up.
History doesn't seem to extend beyond the Second World War in these classrooms. Now, I am overgeneralizing vastly. I won't be like Whoopi Goldberg, who says, "Don't write to me." You can write to me, but I think the level of education could be raised.
I have a little warning for those of you who advertise yourselves on Airbnb, because there was a Houston man who wanted accommodations for the Austin Pride Festival, and he made a booking and he paid for it, and then it was canceled and the lister, a guy named Wasif, sent him a message: "No LGBT people, please. I do not support people who are against humanity. Sorry." So Airbnb says,
Sorry.
Airbnb says, well, we have a zero tolerance policy for discrimination, so you're fired. Well, I mean, this is an issue. You can have anybody in your house that you want. If you just want to have a guest over, you can discriminate in any way that you like. But if you advertise your services through a profit-making service like this,
if you become a public accommodation.
Correct.
Then there you are. All right, in New York City, the pension fund has dumped its investments in gun sellers, Walmart, Dick's Sporting Goods, and others. That's a long way around from the Gays Against Guns story.
Did we talk about what's going on in Mississippi with the appeal there?
No.
No, the Attorney General in Mississippi, Jim Hood, who was a Democrat, right?
Yep.
He announced he won't appeal the judge's ruling blocking the state's
anti-LGBT
law,
yeah.
Not in the best interest of the state or the taxpayers, and they don't have very much money down there.
But
the governor wants to move on with the case.
No, he's hired all the right-wing firms. In Massachusetts, the right wing is not giving up. They want a public referendum to try to repeal the pro-trans bathroom law that was just passed and signed by the governor.
Very inspired by what happened in Dallas.
Yep.
They only have to get 32,000 signatures to get it on the ballot, but they can't get it on the ballot until November 2018 under this process.
Yeah, and they only have 80 days to collect those signatures.
32,000 isn't very hard. Just go to a couple of right-wing churches.
Nice little action in Orlando, Florida, where LGBT protesters showed up to confront Marco Rubio, who was having a little event a couple of blocks from the Pulse nightclub, saying that he was a big hypocrite and had blood on his hands and claimed to be so moved and sympathetic to the community, and yet continues to be horribly anti-gay in his voting record and his attitudes, and, of course, in the pocket of the NRA.
So we tell you about how some of these northern liberal states passed these laws saying you can't travel to states that have these horrible anti-gay laws, and New York State's done a bunch of them. So not laws, but really directives from the executives. But they're having a big basketball tournament with SUNY Albany supposed to play Duke, and the state is saying that is non-essential travel. You can't go because you're from a state institution. So this left a hole in the tournament schedule. They'll probably find somebody else to fill it in.
Yes, they probably will. Congratulations to Dean Hansel, a longtime activist LGBT lawyer. He's been appointed in LA to the Superior Court as a judge.
I want to note the passing of Edmund Browning. I'd forgotten about him, but he had been the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church starting in 1985 in a very tumultuous period, but when isn't it tumultuous? And when he was elected, he said, "This church of ours is open to all. There will be no outcasts. The convictions and hopes of all will be honored." He consecrated the church's first female bishop. He helped move along women's issues, LGBT issues in the church, took a lot of heat for it, and said that, he was totally, how did he get into all this? He was a Methodist originally. He was totally inspired by a trip to Namibia, saw human suffering in the world and said, "I want to devote myself to people who are downtrodden." That's a good reason for getting involved in things.
And the Methodist Church, speaking of them, Western jurisdiction of the United Methodist Church has elected an out lesbian bishop. This is a little contrary to Methodist policy, but they forged ahead, and we'll see whether they get any backlash from the church for that.
Okay.
And the Westboro Baptist Church has received a permit to hold a protest at the Democratic Convention in Philadelphia.
God bless them.
It wouldn't be a convention without them.
No.
In Lebanon, Tennessee, a couple of cops are in trouble for putting up posts on social media criticizing the decision of the United States military to allow service by transgender people. One cop has quit, one has been suspended. And a stunning report came out this week from the Williams Institute.
Yes, it says that LGBT people are more food insecure than our non-gay counterparts.
25%, let me see if I can get this. They did a survey and they found that 25% of the LGBT people they surveyed had, in fact, been unable to afford to feed themselves or their families at least once in the last year.
Compared to 17% of non-LGBT adults.
Yeah.
Well, so, and they say that the food insecurity that we experience is not distributed evenly in the community. Certain racial and ethnic minorities, 42% among African Americans, 33% among Latinos, 32% among American Indians and Alaskan Natives. Women, etc.
It's not like on TV where all the gay people are fabulous and live in nice apartments in Manhattan and are white, said Kathy Bowman, LGBT and HIV project director at Brooklyn Legal Services. It really is, you know, we've said for a long time on this show, we've tried to point out that in fact we are a diverse population economically, and if anything, less economically secure than the population as a whole.
Well,
and people don't want to believe that because we've sold this affluence myth for so many years.
A totally disproportionate number of homeless people, especially homeless youth, but homeless adults as well, are LGBT. I encounter them in New York all the time. You know, because they were thrown out of their homes, they were early on, they had all these other problems, substance abuse, et cetera, and end up in tough spots.
Yeah.
All right. International news?
Sure.
Well, we told you about the new Prime Minister of Britain, Theresa May, conservative in almost every way, but she is basically pro-LGBT. Well,
she evolved.
Yeah, she has named to her cabinet, and she really shook up the cabinet. By the way, they got their election over with. You didn't even hear about it, did you?
About 2 weeks.
It was done within the party, and they got it done. Anyway, she is named Justine Greening, we have a picture of her, as the Education Secretary and Minister for Women and Equalities, the first LGBTQ woman to serve in a UK cabinet.
Well, first out one. I wouldn't be surprised to find that they have many closeted lesbians and gay men.
We know that Margaret Thatcher didn't have any because she didn't have any women in her cabinet. But Chris Smith was the first.
I'm just noting we've had a lot of closeted lesbians in U.S. cabinets.
Yes, Chris Smith was the first openly gay, not only member of Parliament, but the first out gay cabinet secretary in 1997 under Tony Blair.
We've had none in the U.S. No out men or women. But Justine Greening just came out at a Pride event this last year. Well, I'm just wondering how up to date she'll be, but she has a partner, and we're happy for her. And Angela Eagle
dropped out. She's an out lesbian who was challenging Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn.
For the Labour Party leadership.
Yes,
but she is deferred to another guy.
Well, she voted for the Iraq War, and it wasn't making her very popular, like Mike Pence.
She was the first to step out and say we should challenge Corbyn, and that has opened the door for the other guy.
Yes.
You know about this, I don't.
Hey, good news from Bolivia. They're now going to allow people to change their gender on official identity documents. They are joining Argentina, Uruguay, and Colombia as the only 4 nations to do that down there.
Good news from Bermuda, where they've been fighting over same-sex marriage. The Senate there rejected a proposal to pass an amendment to the Human Rights Act that would have limited marriage to men-women relationships only. The fight continues. They're still trying to figure out what they're going to do for same-sex couples. They may do civil unions. The court may mandate marriage, but they actually had a little victory there that was good.
Well, in Romania, as in some other Eastern European countries, they voted to ban same-sex marriage, I think usually through referenda. But the Constitutional Court there is going to still decide whether a same-sex union of a U.S.-Romanian couple who were wedded in Belgium should be recognized in Romania.
Vice President Biden was in Australia recently, and he spoke up for respect for LGBT people and talked about how proud he was of the administration for making advances.
And he told them, don't worry about the election. It's going to turn out okay.
He also said he's gotten in trouble with about 4 heads of state recently for bringing up LGBT issues in his private meetings with them. You go, Joe.
Go for it. Vancouver is now officially the first Canadian city to adopt an inclusive transgender policy. The city council adopted it unanimously. There's going to be gender-neutral bathrooms, sensitivity training for staff. Go for it.
And in Iraq, a religious leader has declined to issue a fatwa against gender nonconformists. He says, don't kill them, just stay away from them.
Yes.
Okay. And the Isle of Man has overcome the objections of one legislator has gotten royal assent, and marriage between same-sex couples is now legal in the Isle of Man. Yes. But in Tanzania, a commissioner there has declared war on the LGBT population. In connection with Justine Greening being appointed Education Secretary in Britain, there was a British study released that said 73% of lesbian and bisexual women are not out at work.
Wow.
And that 74%, this is a study by Pride London, 74% of all LGBT people are not out in public.
Well, straight people aren't out at work either in Britain.
They wear wedding
I'm only
rings.
kidding. I'm kidding. No sex, please. We're British. It's an old expression.
In Russia, they're cracking down even more. LGBT activists wanted to have a gathering, a demonstration. They were denied 11 times a permit for the use of a public park. They were told there were other mass cultural events happening. This is where the mass cultural events were supposedly happening, but were not. So finally, 2 LGBT activists showed up with a rainbow flag and a couple of signs. They were arrested.
Okay. AIDS news?
No? Bosnia and Herzegovina has strengthened its non-discrimination laws for sexual orientation.
Well, you know, they do that as part of being part of the European Union.
Yeah, well, they did something good. Yes. A big international AIDS conference happening in Durban, South Africa.
Hey, they had 8,000 activists marching down there to protest, to get things moving.
A lot of studies released. A new one that says serodiscordant heterosexual couples, only 5% transmission when the non-infected person is on Truvada while the infected person is just getting on treatment. This is not about viral suppression. This is about just taking Truvada to prevent transmission while they're getting treatment.
A transition period.
Yeah.
Did you know that PrEP was not approved for use by individuals under 18 in the United States? It isn't. But they did a study on teenage men who have sex with men in the United States, and they found that when they're monitored monthly, they're adherent, but when you change it to quarterly monitoring, they are much less adherent.
Those teenagers, you need to stay on top of them. San Diego County has made a new commitment to ending the AIDS epidemic locally with aggressive testing and treatment, promotion of pre-exposure and post-exposure prophylaxis, really going out and making sure they find everyone who is infected and getting them on treatment.
Well, the state of New York is trying to do the same thing and is bragging about the fact that new HIV diagnoses fell below 2,500 in 2014 when they have the statistics. It's the lowest number since 2000. 15 years ago, there were more than 6,700 new HIV cases in the state. And so, they are making the whole goal is to get them below 750 cases, and that will be considered an end to the epidemic.
British Prince Harry is attending the International AIDS Conference. He did a live Facebook feed where he was tested for HIV, live streamed it.
How did he do?
Was negative.
No, good for him.
You can see him do it if you go to the Facebook page of the royal family.
They want to hear the gonorrhea story.
Go.
The CDC has some troubling news about it, that there's gonorrhea that may develop resistance to the only recommended treatment of it. The rate of what is to antibiotics, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little muddled here because I also have a blank on this page.
Syphilis and chlamydia are up too. This is back to the 70s when gay men felt free to be sexually active. They had very high rates of sexually transmitted infections. And then when the AIDS epidemic hit, they started using condoms and protection, and the rates of those diseases went down. Now they're again not using condoms as much, and these diseases are popping up again.
An estimated 800,000 new infections of gonorrhea annually in the United States, and fewer than half of them are diagnosed.
And if it's treatment resistant, then you got trouble.
Yeah, very, very bad situation.
Okay.
So use condoms.
Okay.
Okay.
We will now elegantly segue into entertainment news from the gonorrhea news. The big headline, I think, is that this Friday, opening here and I assume everywhere, the new Absolutely Fabulous movie. I hope it is as good as I want it to be.
And Chris Cooper's got a bunch of new movie reviews up. You can go read them at cfcooper.net. And he will be here next week when I am not, as the substitute co-host. Thank you, Chris. He's got reviews of Ghostbusters, Free State of Jones, and Independence Day up there right now.
This Saturday on HBO, the movie of Looking that everyone has been
I'm going to put it on the DVR.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of the program, but I want to see what happens.
Okay. On America's Got Talent, the trans comedian Julia Scotti, an older woman, continues to impress the judges and has advanced to the live shows. She's pretty amusing. I've watched clips.
And if you want to see George Takei up close, well, he's going to be doing a production of Pacific Overtures, which I've never seen, the Sondheim musical.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
And it's at the Classic Stage Company, so it's going to be in a small space with about 300 seats.
They released the Emmy nominations, lots and lots and lots and lots of gay stuff.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Transparent.
Orange is the New Black. Gaycation.
RuPaul's Drag Race.
Jane Lynch, Project Runway.
Lily Tomlin.
Her Story, web series.
Ryan Murphy.
Kate McKinnon, Tig Notaro, RuPaul.
It's gay. So many we can't read them all.
Maplethorpe on HBO. September is the Emmy Awards. Vice has renewed Ellen Page's show Gaycation for a second season. I was skeptical about it at first, but I watched it and I liked it. I thought it was quite interesting because they went in depth in a number of other countries. I don't know where they're going to this time. And at Comic-Con I think in San Diego, where they always have a lot of gay panels, and it's become very gay, they're having a bisexuality panel, and Binet USA is announcing a new Stories project, which I think sounds very interesting.
You're going to end?
That's it.
You're going to handle the Democratic convention without me?
Oh, it'll be sad, but
when I come back, I'll be able to do the end of it.
That's right. We'll be doing the end of the Republican convention next week and the beginning of the Democrats, and then ending the Democrats when you come back.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much.
See you next week. Bye-bye.